High Commander Velkan stood on the bridge of the battleship Flame of Honor and watched another orbital station die. The massive structure that had protected Zorathian for 300 years was now breaking apart in space. Pieces of metal and crystal fell toward the planet below like burning rain. The Vextai had torn it apart in less than an hour. Velkan was old for a Zorathian. His scales had turned from bright green to deep emerald over his 60 years of military service. Scars from plasma burns crossed his chest and arms. He had fought in 12 wars and won them all. But this war was different. This war was ending everything. The Zorathian Empire had once ruled 3 star systems. Their ships had traveled to distant worlds and brought back riches beyond counting. Their warriors were feared and respected across the galaxy. Their plasma weapons could cut through any known armor. Their battle tactics were studied in military academies on 100 different worlds, but none of that mattered now. The Vextai had come from the darkness between stars. They were not like any enemy the Zorathians had ever faced. The creatures looked like giant insects, but they were much worse. They traveled in bioships that could heal themselves. When a Zorathian plasma cannon damaged their hull, the ship would simply grow new parts. When their weapons were destroyed, they would grow new ones. When they were cut in half, they would become 2 smaller ships. Velkan had watched the Vextai destroy the outer colonies first. The garrison on Veltar had sent a final message before going silent. They keep coming back. We kill them, but they keep coming back. Then nothing. The entire world had gone dark. The second system had lasted longer. The mining worlds there had better defenses and more ships, but the result was the same. The Vextai would attack, and the defenders would fight them off. Then more Vextai would come, and more, until there were no defenders left. Now only SciFiPrime remained. The homeworld, the birthplace of their civilization, the last light in a galaxy that was growing darker every day. "Sir," called Shivara from her communications station. She was young even by Zorathian standards. Her scales still showed the bright yellow of youth around the edges. She had joined the fleet only 2 years ago. She had never known peace. "We are receiving reports from the outer defense platforms." "What do they say?" Velkan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Platform 7 is requesting immediate reinforcement. They report massive bioship formations approaching from the asteroid belt. Platform 12 has lost contact with its fighter wings. Platform 3 has gone silent, sir." Velkan nodded. It was the same pattern as always. The Vextai would probe the defenses first. They would test every weakness. Then they would attack all at once from every direction, and they would keep attacking until nothing was left. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his tactical officer. 43 capital ships, sir. Maybe 200 fighters that are still combat ready. The shipyards completed repairs on 6 more vessels, but they need more time for proper testing. 43 ships. Velkan remembered when the Zorathian fleet had numbered in the thousands. He remembered battles where they had deployed entire armadas. Now they had 43 ships to defend their entire civilization. "Sir," Shivara called again. Her voice was tight with worry. "I am picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." "Define strange." "There is a massive energy signature at the edge of the system, but it is not moving like a normal ship. The readings suggest dimensional flux, like something is trying to push through from somewhere else." Velkan looked at the readings on his command screen. The energy signature was indeed massive, larger than anything in their databases. But the readings made no sense. No known technology could create that kind of dimensional disturbance? "Could it be a new Vextai weapon?" asked Kira from the tactical station. She was one of their best analysts. If anyone could figure out what they were seeing, it would be her. "I do not think so, sir," Shivara replied. "The energy patterns are completely different from anything the Vextai use. This is something else entirely." Velkan studied the data for a long moment. Part of him wanted to believe it might be reinforcements. Maybe one of the distant colonies had survived. Maybe they had built new ships and were coming to help. But he had been a soldier too long to believe in miracles. "Keep monitoring it," he ordered, "but focus our main attention on the incoming Vextai formations. We have maybe 6 hours before they reach our inner defenses." Down on the planet's surface, the evacuation was still continuing. Millions of Zorathian civilians were being moved to the underground bunkers that had been carved deep into the planet's crust. The bunkers had their own power sources and air recycling systems. They were designed to keep the population alive, even if the surface was completely destroyed. Children cried as they were separated from parents who had volunteered to stay and fight. Elderly Zorathians who remembered the Great Expansion looked up at the sky and wondered if they would ever see the stars again. Merchants who had once traded across 3 systems now carried only what they could hold in their arms. In the ancient temple at the heart of the capital city, the eldest mystic, Carthon, knelt before the sacred flames. He was older than anyone could remember. Some said he had lived for over 200 years. His scales had turned almost white with age, and his eyes had the cloudy look of the very old. But his voice was still strong when he spoke the old prophecies. "When the dying light fades," he whispered to the flames, "salvation shall rise from the depths between stars." The other mystics around him shook their heads sadly. The old prophecies had once given hope to their people. But hope was a luxury they could no longer afford. The Vextai did not care about prophecies. They only cared about consuming everything in their path. But Carthon continued to stare at the flames, and in the dancing light, he saw something that made his ancient heart beat faster. He saw ships made of metal instead of flesh. He saw weapons that did not heal but only destroyed. He saw warriors who had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Back on the bridge of the Flame of Honor, the reports continued to pour in. The outer platforms were falling one by one. Fighter squadrons were being overwhelmed. The Vextai bioships were adapting to their weapons even faster than before. "Sir," the navigation officer called out, "we are receiving a priority transmission from the evacuation centers. They are requesting an additional 12 hours to complete the civilian relocations." "We do not have 12 hours, Velkan replied. "Tell them to move faster and prepare the fleet for final defensive positions." He looked around the bridge at his crew. They were good soldiers. They had served with honor. They deserved better than this ending. But sometimes the universe did not care what anyone deserved. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communication system. "This is High Commander Velkan. In 6 hours, the enemy will reach our world. We will meet them with everything we have. We will make them pay for every meter of space. We will show them that the Zorathian spirit cannot be broken even in death. For the Empire, for our people, for our future." The responses came back immediately, from every ship. "For the Empire, for our people, for our future." But as Velkan looked out at the approaching darkness, he wondered if there would be anyone left to remember their sacrifice. The Vextai had consumed so many worlds, so many civilizations. Would the Zorathians be just another forgotten people in an empty galaxy? The strange energy signature at the edge of the system continued to pulse. But with the Vextai so close, there was no time to investigate. No time for anything except the final battle that would decide the fate of their entire species. The first Vextai bioships appeared on the inner sensor grid exactly when the tactical computers had predicted. Shivara watched the readings with growing dread as more and more contacts appeared. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. The swarm was larger than anything they had faced before. "All defensive platforms report ready, sir," announced the tactical officer. "Fighter wings are launching now. The planetary defense grid is online and charging weapons." Velkan nodded and opened communications to all ships. "This is it. All vessels move to attack formation Beta 7. Target the largest bioships first. Try to disrupt their regeneration cycles before they can adapt to our weapons." The Zorathian fleet moved into position with practiced precision. Even facing impossible odds, they maintained their discipline. Velkan felt a surge of pride watching his ships take their places. Whatever else happened, the Vextai would know they had been in a fight. The bioships came in like a living wave. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms. Weapon pods grew from their sides like tumors. Smaller fighter organisms swarmed around the larger vessels like parasites. The sight was enough to make even veteran soldiers feel sick. "Begin bombardment," Velkan ordered. The Zorathian plasma cannons opened fire all at once. Brilliant streams of superheated energy reached across space and struck the leading bioships. For a moment, it looked like the attack was working. Huge. Sections of organic hull burned away. Several smaller vessels were completely destroyed. But then the regeneration began. The damaged bioships started growing new hull sections. The destroyed weapons grew back. Within minutes, the swarm was as strong as before. And they were still coming. "Sir," Shivara called out over the noise of battle. "I am receiving an incoming transmission on emergency frequency 7. "From who?" Velkan demanded. All Zorathian ships were already on the tactical network. There should be no other transmissions. "Unknown, sir. The signal is very strong and very clean. It is using universal trade language, but the source identifier is not in our databases." Velkan frowned. In the middle of a battle for survival, the last thing he needed was strange transmissions from unknown sources. But something about this felt different. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything Velkan had ever heard. It was clearly organic, but there was something about the tone and rhythm that was completely alien. The words were spoken in perfect universal trade language, but with an accent that belonged to no known species. "Zorathian forces, this is UEF Dreadnought Indomitable. We have observed your situation. Maintain your defensive positions. Assistance is en route." Silence filled the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at Velkan. UEF Dreadnought Indomitable. None of those words appeared in any galactic database. There was no known species called UEF, no known ship classification called Dreadnought, and the name Indomitable belonged to no vessel in recorded history. "Shivara," Velkan said slowly. "Request identification and fleet registry from the unknown. Contact." "Transmitting now, sir." Shivara worked at her console for a moment, then looked up with confusion. "Sir, they are responding, but the fleet registry they are providing does not match anything in our databases. They claim to be from something called the United Earth Federation." "United Earth Federation," repeated Kira from the tactical station. She was already running searches through the galactic database. "Sir, there is no record of any species or government by that name. And Earth is listed as a dead system near the galactic core. The radiation levels there are supposed to make life impossible." Velkan looked back at the tactical display. The Vextai bioships were getting closer. His own fleet was taking heavy damage. Several platforms had already gone dark. This was not the time for mysteries. "Unknown vessel Indomitable," he transmitted back. "We appreciate any assistance, but we need immediate support. Can you provide tactical data on your capabilities and estimated time of arrival?" The response came back almost instantly. "Zorathian, Command, we are currently completing dimensional phase transition. Our arrival will be obvious. Recommend all friendly forces maintain minimum safe distance of 50 kilometers from incoming Vextai formations." 50 kilometers. Velkan stared at the transmission log. What kind of weapon required 50 kilometers of safe distance? Even their largest plasma cannons only needed a few hundred meters of clearance. "Sir," announced the sensor operator, "that strange energy signature at the edge of the system is moving, and it is moving fast, much faster than any known drive system should allow." Velkan pulled up the long-range sensor data on his command screen. The energy signature was indeed moving toward them, but the readings still made no sense. Whatever was generating that much power should have been visible to their telescopes. Instead, there was nothing but empty space. Down on the planet's surface, millions of civilians watched the battle through emergency broadcasts. They could see the flashes of weapons fire in the night sky. They could hear the rumble of explosions as debris fell through the atmosphere. Parents held their children close and wondered if they would live to see another sunrise. But then something changed. People began pointing at the sky and crying out in amazement. A shadow was appearing among the stars. Not the shadow of a ship, but the shadow of something so large it was blocking out entire constellations. In the underground bunkers, elderly Zorathians who had lived through previous wars shook their heads in disbelief. They had seen the largest ships ever built by their civilization. They had witnessed battles involving hundreds of vessels, but nothing had prepared them for this. "Sir," Shivara called out with excitement and fear in her voice. "The unknown! Contact is broadcasting again! Put it through!" The same alien voice filled the bridge. But this time there was something different in the tone, something that sounded almost like anticipation. "Zorathian forces, this is Captain Doyun of the UEF Indomitable. We are beginning final phase transition now. Be advised that we have encountered Vexte formations before. We know their weaknesses. Maintain your positions and prepare for immediate tactical support. Captain Dohyun." The name sounded strange to Zorathian ears, but there was something about the way he spoke that commanded respect. This was clearly someone who had been in command for a long time, someone who had faced impossible situations and found ways to win. "All ships," Velkan announced to his fleet. "Unknown reinforcements are approaching. Continue current attack patterns, but be prepared for new tactical developments." The Vextai swarm had noticed the approaching energy signature, too. The bioships were starting to change formation. Some of the larger vessels were turning to face the new threat. But they seemed confused. Their sensors were clearly detecting something, but they could not identify what it was. Kira was running constant analysis on the energy readings. "Sir, the power output from that contact is off our measurement scales. Whatever kind of ship this is, it would have to be larger than our capital city. And the energy patterns suggest technology we have never seen before." "Could it be some kind of super weapon?" asked the weapons officer. "I do not know," Kira replied. "But if it is on our side, we might actually have a chance." Velkan wanted to believe it, but he had been disappointed by hope too many times. The universe had a way of crushing optimism with cold reality. Still, something about this felt different. The transmission had been so confident, so certain, as if victory was not just possible, but inevitable. The battle continued around them. Zorathian ships traded fire with bioships in a deadly dance of destruction and regeneration. More platforms fell silent. More fighters were overwhelmed. But now everyone was watching the edge of the system where something impossible was about to emerge from empty space. "Sir," announced the navigation officer, "whatever is coming, it will be here in less than 10 minutes. And sir, the energy readings are still climbing. I have never seen anything like this." Velkan gripped the command rail tighter. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, they would either be saved or they would learn that the universe still had new ways to disappoint them. Either way, the waiting would finally be over. The Vextai swarm was getting closer. Some of the bioships were already in range of the planetary defense grid. Massive energy beams reached up from the surface and struck the organic hulls. But as always, the creatures began healing almost immediately. 5 minutes, sir," called the navigation officer. Velkan opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is the High Commander. Unknown reinforcements will arrive in 5 minutes. Until then, we hold the line. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We are Zorathian warriors, and we will show these monsters what that means." The response came back from every ship at once. "We hold the line." And in the darkness between stars, something vast and terrible began to emerge from the space between dimensions. Space itself seemed to tear open at the edge of the Zorathia system. Reality rippled like water, and something massive began to push through from another dimension. The energy readings on every Zorathian sensor went completely off scale. "Warning, Alarms blared across the fleet as their instruments tried to process what they were seeing. Then the UEF Indomitable fully emerged into normal space, and every living being in the system fell silent. The ship was a monster. 20 kilometers from bow to stern, it dwarfed even the largest Zorathian capital ships. Its hull was made of some dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Massive weapon ports lined its sides like the eyes of some ancient predator. Strange energy fields rippled across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it was not just the size that made the Zorathians stare in shock. It was the scars. The entire hull was covered in battle damage that had been repaired and repaired again. Sections of armor plating showed different metals welded together. Weapon mounts had been rebuilt so many times they looked like mechanical tumors. This was not a parade ship or a show of force. This was a weapon that had been forged in the fires of countless battles. "Sir," whispered Shivara from her communication station, "I am reading over 4 million life signs aboard that vessel. And sir, the weapon signatures are unlike anything in our databases. I cannot even classify most of them." Velkan stared at the massive ship on his tactical display. 4 million beings. That was more than the entire population of some Zorathian colonies. What kind of species built ships that could carry entire civilizations? The Vextai swarm had noticed the newcomer too. The bioships were changing formation again, but now there was something different in their movement patterns. Something that looked almost like uncertainty. The hive mind that controlled them was clearly trying to process this new threat. A new transmission came from the Indomitable. This time the voice was calm and measured with the kind of authority that came from decades of command experience. Zorathian. "Command, this is Captain Doyen of the United Earth Federation vessel Indomitable. We are human. We have been monitoring your conflict while returning from a long-range mission beyond the Galactic Rim." Human? Velkan had never heard of any species by that name, and beyond the Galactic Rim meant they had traveled into the void between galaxies. No known species had that kind of range or technology. "Captain Dohyun," Velkan replied. "I am Hai, Commander Velkan of the Zorathian Defense Fleet. We appreciate your arrival, but we must warn you that the Vextai are extremely dangerous. They can regenerate damage faster than most weapons can inflict it, and there are thousands of them." There was a pause before Dohyun responded. When his voice came back, there was something in it that sounded almost like grim amusement. "High Commander, we have fought the Vextai before, in the dark spaces between galaxies where they breed in the cold void. We know their weaknesses, and we know how to kill them permanently. Kill them permanently." Velkan felt a surge of hope that he quickly suppressed. Every species that had encountered the Vextai had claimed to know their weaknesses. None of those species existed anymore. "Sir," announced Kira from the tactical station, "the human ship is powering up weapon systems. The energy readings are massive, sir, much larger than anything we have ever recorded." On the view screen, the Indomitable was indeed preparing for battle. Weapon ports that had been dark were now glowing with internal light. Energy fields were intensifying across the hull, and something was happening to space around the ship. Reality itself seemed to be bending slightly, as if the vessel was too heavy for normal physics to support. Commander Yiori stood at her weapons control station deep in the heart of the Indomitable. She was young for a senior officer, but she had earned her position through 5 years of void warfare against things that would drive most beings insane. Her hands moved across control surfaces that looked nothing like Zorathian technology. "Captain," she reported, "all quantum disruption batteries are online and charged. Abyssal torpedo tubes are loaded and ready. Point defense systems are active. We are ready to engage." Captain Doyun nodded from his command chair. He was older than most of his crew, with gray hair and the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much death. But his voice remained steady and calm. "All Zorathian vessels," he transmitted, "withdraw to minimum safe distance immediately. We are about to demonstrate why the Vextai fear traveling into human space." The Zorathian fleet began pulling back as ordered. Some of the captains wanted to stay and fight alongside their mysterious allies, but Velkan had enough military experience to know when to follow orders from someone who clearly knew what they were doing. The Vextai swarm continued advancing toward HFY. The bioships were now focusing most of their attention on the massive human vessel. They could sense that this was the real threat. Weapon pods began growing from their hulls. Organic cannons started charging with corrosive energy. On the surface of Zorathia, Prime, billions of civilians watched through emergency broadcasts as the fate of their species was decided in the space above their heads. Children who had never known peace pointed at the sky and asked their parents if the giant ship was going to save them. Parents who had given up hope looked at the scarred hull of the Indomitable and dared to believe that maybe the war was not over yet. In the ancient Temple, Carthon smiled for the first time in years. The old mystic looked up at the ceiling as if he could see through stone and metal to the stars beyond. Salvation from the depths between stars, he whispered, just as the prophecy foretold. The first Vextai bioships opened fire on the Indomitable. Streams of corrosive energy and organic projectiles reached across space toward the human vessel. The attacks struck the ship's shields and simply vanished. Whatever technology the humans were using, it absorbed the bioweapons like they were nothing more than gentle rain. "Sir," reported the Zorathian sensor operator, "the human ship is not even damaged. Their defensive systems are deflecting everything the Vextai can throw at them." Velkan nodded but kept his attention focused on the tactical display. He had seen too many battles turn on a single moment. The Vextai were just getting started. More bioships joined the attack. The sky lit up with weapon fire as hundreds of organic cannons targeted the Indomitable. Still, the human vessel showed no signs of damage. But now it was beginning to respond. The first human weapon to fire was something the Zorathians had never seen before. A beam of pure darkness reached out from the Indomitable and touched one of the larger bioships. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the bioship simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone as if it had never been there at all. "What was that?" demanded Kira. Before anyone could answer, another dark beam reached out and erased another bioship from existence. Then another. The human weapons were not just destroying the Vextai vessels. They were removing them from reality itself. Commander Iori smiled grimly as she targeted another bioship. The quantum disruption cannons were working perfectly. Each shot created a localized collapse of space-time that unraveled the quantum bonds holding matter together. The Vextai regeneration abilities were useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of reality. "Target the command variants," Captain Do-Yun ordered. "Cut off their coordination first." Iori adjusted her targeting parameters and fired again. The largest bioships in the swarm began disappearing one by one, but the Vextai were adapting quickly. They started spreading out and changing their attack patterns. Some of the smaller vessels began diving toward the planet's surface. "They are trying to get past us to attack the civilian population," Iori reported. "Not acceptable," Do-Yun replied calmly. "Minho, prepare the abyssal torpedoes." Deep in the engineering, Section Chief Engineer Minho received the order and began the final arming sequence for humanity's most devastating weapon. The abyssal torpedoes were not just bombs. They were concentrated packages of the same dark energy that had destroyed Earth's sun. Each one could unravel the fabric of space itself across several cubic kilometers. "Torpedoes armed and ready, sir," Minho reported, warning all ships to maintain maximum distance. The first abyssal torpedo launched from the Indomitable in a streak of absolute darkness. It struck the center of the Vextai formation and exploded into a sphere of nothingness that expanded outward at the speed of light. Everything it touched simply stopped existing. Bioships, space dust, even light itself was consumed by the expanding void. When the effect finally stabilized, nearly half the Vextai swarm had been erased from the universe. The remaining bioships scattered in all directions as their hive. Mind struggled to process what had just happened. "Sir," Shivara called out with wonder in her voice, "the human weapons are working. The Vextai are actually retreating." Velkan could hardly believe what he was seeing. For the first time since the war began, the Vextai were running away. These mysterious humans had done in minutes what the entire Zorathian military had failed to accomplish in months of fighting. But the battle was not over yet. The remaining Vextai bioships regrouped at the edge of the system and began a coordinated assault like nothing the Zorathians had ever witnessed. The creatures had learned from the initial attack and were now approaching from multiple vectors, simultaneously. Hundreds of vessels came at the Indomitable from above and below, while others attempted flanking maneuvers from the sides. Captain Do-yun watched the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had faced this exact situation many times before. The Vextai were following their standard panic response protocol. When faced with superior firepower, they would attempt to overwhelm through sheer numbers and complex attack patterns. "Minho," he called to the engineering section, "bring the quantum field generators to full power. So Young prepare the point defense network for saturation bombardment." Tactical systems operator So Young had been waiting for this order. Her fingers danced across control surfaces that managed thousands of individual weapon systems. The Indomitable was not just one ship. It was an entire fleet compressed into a single hull. Every section bristled with weapons designed to fight. Horrors that lurked in the void between galaxies. "Point defense network online, sir," she reported. "All batteries are charged and tracking multiple targets." The first wave of Vextai bioships entered the Indomitable's engagement range, and suddenly space exploded with light. Hundreds of smaller weapons opened fire simultaneously. Unlike the massive quantum disruption cannons, these were conventional energy weapons. But they fired so fast and with such precision that they created a wall of destruction around the human vessel. Bioships that had survived the journey across interstellar space were shredded in seconds. The point defense system tracked every incoming projectile and destroyed it before it could reach the hull. Organic fighters that tried to get close were vaporized by concentrated beams of coherent energy. "Sir," reported Yeori from the weapons station, "the smaller vessels are cleared, but the larger bioships are adapting their armor. Recommend switching to primary batteries." "Approved," Do-yun replied. "Target the command variants first. Cut off their coordination." The quantum disruption cannons fired again and again. Each shot removed a bioship from existence with mathematical precision. But the Vextai had learned from their previous encounters with human weapons. Some of the larger vessels had modified their hull structure to distribute quantum effects across multiple compartments. They were still destroyed, but it took several hits instead of one. Velkan watched the battle from the bridge of the Flame of Honor and tried to understand what he was seeing. The human ship was fighting alone against hundreds of enemies and winning. Not just winning, but dominating. The Vextai swarm that had conquered 3 star systems was being systematically dismantled by a single vessel. "Sir," called Kira from the tactical station, "I am analyzing the human weapon signatures. The energy patterns suggest technology that is centuries ahead of anything in our databases, maybe thousands of years ahead." "How is that possible?" asked the navigation officer. "The Galactic Survey has mapped every star system for 50,000 light years. There are no unknown civilizations with that kind of capability." Kira shook her head. "According to the long-range sensors, that ship came from beyond the galactic rim, from the void between galaxies. Maybe humans developed this technology out there in the darkness." The battle continued with increasing intensity. More Vextai bioships were arriving from other parts of the system. These were the reserve forces that had been held back for the final assault on SciFiPrime. Now, they were all converging on the human vessel in a desperate attempt to overwhelm its defenses. but the Indomitable was ready for them. Chief Engineer Minho had been monitoring the quantum field generators and power distribution systems throughout the engagement. Everything was running within acceptable parameters. The ship could maintain this level of combat indefinitely. "Captain," he reported from the engineering section, "all systems are operating normally. We can increase fire rate if needed." "Do it," Do-Yun ordered. "So-Young, prepare the abyssal torpedo tubes for rapid fire sequence." So-Young's hands moved across her controls with practiced efficiency. The abyssal torpedoes were humanity's answer to enemies that could not be killed by conventional means. Each torpedo contained a small amount of dark matter surrounded by exotic particles that had been harvested from the event horizon of black holes. "Tubes loaded and ready, sir," she announced, warning all friendly forces to maintain safe distance. "All Zorathian vessels," Do-Yun transmitted to the watching fleet, "withdraw to minimum range of 100 kilometers. We are about to demonstrate maximum firepower." Velkan immediately ordered his ships to pull back even further. He had seen what one abyssal torpedo could do. He did not want to imagine what multiple torpedoes might accomplish. The first salvo launched from the Indomitable in a stream of absolute darkness. 6 torpedoes spread out across the approaching Vextai formation and detonated simultaneously. The effect was devastating beyond comprehension. Spheres of nothingness expanded outward and merged into a single zone of destruction that consumed everything in its path. When the dark energy finally dissipated, nearly 2/3 of the remaining Vextai swarm had simply ceased to exist. The survivors were scattered and disorganized. Their hive mind was struggling to maintain coordination as more and more nodes were destroyed. "Sir," Shivara called out with excitement, "the Vextai are broadcasting some kind of distress signal. They are calling for reinforcements from other systems." Velkan felt a chill run down his spine. If more swarms arrived, the battle might turn against them again. But Captain Do-Yun seemed unconcerned by this development. "Standard Vextai protocol," he transmitted to the Zorathian fleet. "They always call for help when they encounter effective resistance. But their reinforcements will not arrive in time to matter." The remaining bioships were now attempting a final desperate assault. They had abandoned all tactics and were simply charging straight at the Indomitable, hoping to inflict some damage before being destroyed. It was the behavior of creatures that knew they were doomed, but refused to surrender. Diplomatic Officer Jiho had been monitoring the battle from his station near the bridge. He was one of the few humans aboard the Indomitable who had extensive experience dealing with other species. His job was to analyze alien behavior and provide cultural context for military decisions. "Captain," he reported, "the Vextai are exhibiting terminal aggression patterns. This is likely the last organized resistance we will face in this system." "Understood," Do-Hyun replied. "All batteries concentrate fire on the remaining command variants. End this." The final phase of the battle lasted less than 10 minutes. The quantum disruption cannons fired in perfect synchronization, while the point defense network created a barrier of destruction that nothing could penetrate. One by one, the last Vextai bioships were erased from existence until space around HFY was finally clear. When the shooting stopped, a strange silence fell over the system. For the first time in months, there were no energy weapons firing, no bioships regenerating, no organic fighters swarming through space. The war was over. "Sir," announced So-Young from her tactical station, "all hostile contacts have been eliminated. The system is clear." Captain Do-Hyun nodded and opened a channel to the Zorathian fleet. "High Commander Velkan, this is Captain Do-Hyun. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Your people are safe." Velkan stared at the tactical display showing empty space where moments before there had been an unstoppable swarm of alien monsters. The Vextai were gone. All of them. Destroyed so completely that not even debris remained. "Captain Do-Yun," he transmitted back, "on behalf of the Zorathian people, I thank you for your assistance. You have saved our entire civilization. How can we ever repay such a debt?" There was a long pause before Do-hyun responded. When his voice came back, there was something different in the tone. Something that sounded almost like sadness. "High Commander, we need to talk. There are things you should know about who we are and why we were able to help you. Things that will change how you see the galaxy. Would you be willing to meet in person?" Velkan looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They had all heard the strange sadness in the human captain's voice. Whatever these mysterious allies wanted to discuss, it was clearly something serious. "Of course, Captain," he replied. "You are welcome aboard any of our vessels, or if you prefer, we can meet aboard your ship. We will prepare a shuttle bay to receive you," Do-hyun said. "Come alone if possible. What we have to tell you is not something that should be shared with large groups until you have time to process it." Velkan felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had just saved his entire species, but now it sounded like that salvation had come with a price that had not yet been revealed. The shuttle bay of the Indomitable was larger than most Zorathian military installations. Velkan's transport looked like a child's toy as it settled onto the landing platform, surrounded by human fighters that dwarfed even his largest vessels. The bay doors sealed and atmosphere was restored while he tried to process the scale of what he was seeing. Everything about human technology was different. The metal walls seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. The lighting came from sources he could not identify. The air itself felt strange somehow, as if it contained particles that did not exist in normal space. This was clearly the product of a civilization that had developed along completely different lines from any known species. Captain Do-hyun was waiting for him at the bottom of the shuttle ramp. He was taller than most humans Velkan had seen in the galactic databases, but there was something about his bearing that spoke of command authority earned through experience rather than rank. His uniform was simple and practical, with no decorative elements. This was clearly someone who valued function over appearance. "High Commander Velkan," Do-hyun said with a slight bow. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable. I am Captain Do-hyun. Thank you for coming." "Captain," Velkan replied, returning the bow. "Thank you for saving my people. I still do not fully understand how you were able to destroy the Vextai so easily when our entire military could not stop them." Do-hyun's expression grew serious. "That is what we need to discuss. Would you join me in my ready room? There are things about humanity and our current situation that you need to understand." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Velkan saw thousands of humans going about their daily duties, men and women of all ages working together with the kind of efficient cooperation that came from living in close quarters for extended periods. But there was something in their faces that troubled him, a weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. "How many people live on this ship?" he asked as they walked. "Currently about 4 million, Do-hyun replied. "Though that number changes depending on circumstances. 4 million people living on a single vessel." Velkan had trouble processing the implications. The largest Zorathian ships carried crews of maybe 50,000. But this was clearly not just a warship. It was an entire civilization compressed into mobile form. The ready room was surprisingly small and simple. A desk, some chairs, and a wall display showing the current tactical situation. Do-hyun gestured for Velkan to sit, then poured 2 cups of what looked like tea from a simple ceramic pot. "High Commander," he began, "I need to tell you something that may be difficult to hear. The Indomitable is not a military vessel in the traditional sense. It is an arc ship. We are refugees." "Refugees?" Velkan asked. "From what?" Do-hyun activated the wall display and showed an image of a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. "This was Earth, our home world. It was destroyed 800 years ago when our sun entered an unstable phase and expanded beyond the orbital zone." The image changed to show the same system, but now the star was a bloated red giant that had consumed the inner planets. Where Earth had been, there was now only stellar plasma and debris. We managed to evacuate most of our population before the end. Do-hyun continued. 50 billion people spread across 200 ARC ships. We have been wandering the galaxy ever since looking for a new home. Velkan stared at the display in shock. An entire species homeless for 8 centuries. No wonder their technology was so advanced. They had been forced to develop ways to survive in the void between stars. But you said there were only 4 million people on this ship, he pointed out. Do-hyun's expression grew even more serious. High Commander, the Indomitable is the last ship. All the others have been lost over the centuries. We are all that remains of humanity. The words hit Velkan like a physical blow. These beings who had just saved his entire civilization were themselves facing extinction. The last survivors of their species carrying the final remnants of their culture in a single massive vessel. How? He asked quietly. The galaxy is more dangerous than most species realize, Do-hyun explained. Beyond the rim where the major civilizations do not travel, there are things that feed on entire worlds. The Vextai are just one of many threats. We have spent 8 centuries fighting our way through horrors that would drive most beings insane. Science Officer Hanul entered the ready room, carrying a data pad. She was younger than Do-hyun, with the kind of intense focus that came from spending years studying things that should not exist. Captain, she said with a brief nod to Velkan, I have completed the analysis of our current situation. Our population stands at 4,200,000. Food production is at 90% of optimal. The quantum drive core will need major maintenance within the next 5 years. Thank you, Hanul, Do-hyun said. Then to Velkan he added, Our ship can sustain us indefinitely, but we are living on borrowed time. Every battle costs us resources we cannot easily replace. Every year, more of our people choose not to have children because they see no future for them. Velkan began to understand the sadness he had heard in Do-hyun's voice. These humans possessed weapons that could destroy entire fleets, but they were slowly dying as a species. Their technology could not solve the fundamental problem of having no home. What do you want from us? He asked. Before Do-hyun could answer, another human entered the room. This was Sunwoo, a civilian representative who spoke for the non-military population aboard the ship. He was older than the others, with gray hair and the kind of lines around his eyes that came from making difficult decisions. High Commander, Sunwoo said, taking a seat. We want to offer you a partnership. Your people have something we need. You have worlds, resources, and a future. We have something you need. We have weapons, knowledge, and the experience of 8 centuries of warfare against things like the Vextai. You are suggesting an alliance? Velkan asked. More than that, replied Do-hyun. We are suggesting integration. Your people and ours working together as equals, sharing our strengths and supporting each other's weaknesses. Velkan considered this carefully. The Zorathians had always been proud of their independence. They had never formed lasting alliances with other species, but they had also never faced extinction before. And they had never met another species that had proven capable of protecting them from threats they could not handle alone. What would this integration look like in practical terms? He asked. Hanel consulted her data pad. We would establish human settlements on your worlds. Our people would share their knowledge of advanced technology and defensive systems. In return, your people would provide us with the resources and population base we need to survive as a species. And if more threats like the Vextai appear? Velkan asked. Then we face them together, Do-hyun said simply. Your conventional forces supported by our specialized weapons, your numbers reinforced by our experience. Neither of our species would have to face the darkness alone again. Sunwoo leaned forward in his chair. High Commander, we have been alone in the void for 800 years. We have forgotten what it feels like to have allies, to have a place to call home. Your people could give us that. And in return, we could make sure that what happened to the Zorathians over the past months never happens again. Velkan thought about his conversation with the old mystic Carthon, salvation from the depths between stars. Perhaps the prophecy had been more literal than anyone had realized. These humans had indeed come from the depths, and they were offering salvation not just from the Vextai, but from all the other horrors that lurked in the dark spaces of the galaxy. "I would need to discuss this with the Zorathian Council," he said finally. "This is not a decision I can make alone." "Of course," Do-hyun replied. "Take all the time you need. We have waited 8 centuries. We can wait a little longer." But even as he said this, Velkan knew what his answer would be. The Zorathians had always prided themselves on being strong enough to stand alone. But strength was not just about individual power. Sometimes it was about knowing when to accept help from those who had proven themselves worthy of trust. Young civilian Yunbi had been watching the conversation from a corner of the room where she had been quietly translating technical documents. She was one of the youngest humans aboard the ship, born during the long journey through the void. She had never seen a planet from the surface, never breathed air that had not been recycled through ship systems, never known what it felt like to look up at a sky instead of a ceiling. "Hi, Commander," she said quietly. "If your people agree to this alliance, would it be possible for some of us to visit your worlds? Not to settle permanently, but just to see what it feels like to stand on solid ground under an open sky?" Velkan looked at the young human and saw something in her eyes that reminded him of his own people. Hope mixed with fear. The desire for something better balanced against the knowledge that the universe rarely gave anyone what they wanted. "Eunbi," he said, using her name for the first time. "If our peoples choose to work together, then you will be welcome on any Zorathian world. You will walk under our skies and feel our soil beneath your feet. This I promise you." The smile that spread across her face was worth more than all the advanced weapons and technological marvels aboard the Indomitable.